This video, we will work on the slotted ends of the nesting basket. So these are the hoop shape patterns that you can print up on your USB, or you can use the files and create them using the embroidery machine. So you're going to cut out these patterns. You're going to trace it onto hoop shape and cut out your hoop shape. I mark them for whatever the particular block is, because this denotes your placement in when you put it together. So I marked A4 and C1, they are the same. I marked A1 and C4 because they are the same. They're just mirror images of the first two. I've got my fabric ready. I've hooped up a tearaway stabilizer in my hoop. I'm going to go ahead and stitch 4 of these in my one hoop. So you can do that. The files are separate, but I'm going to go ahead and do all 4 in my hoop to save on stabilizer. And the first step is to put water-soluble thread in the hoop and stitch the placement stitch. I will be using a color that matches my fabric so that it can be seen on camera. I've got my placement stitches done in my big hoop for A1, C1, C4, and A4. And as you can see, they all have a small section at one end stitched like this. And this is because we're going to take the hoop shape. So this is my A1 hoop shape. And I will place it within the stitching. And there's going to be a gap down here where there is no hoop shape because it's got a bend when your nesting basket is put together. So this allows for the bend. So again, I will use my glue pen. Put a little bit of glue on it, on the stabilizer, and align my hoop shape within my stitching. And I will do that to all 4 of my sections. And then we will put it back on the machine with water-soluble thread, and the machine will tack down the hoop shape. So all of my hoop shape is tacked down in my hoop, and everything's marked so I know what it is once I cut it with fabric, because they're a little bit different, and this is going to tell you where to place it when you put it together. So make sure you mark what the different shapes are. So we're going to go ahead and finish out C4, and they're all the same from here on in. So we need 2 pieces of fabric. One will go on the front of the hoop, one will go on the back. So I will turn my hoop over, and this is the one we're going to work on. And I will take my piece of fabric with the right side facing up. So this is the back of the hoop, right side facing up, and of course with batik it's hard to tell. And I'm going to center this over the hoop shape just by turning it back, making sure that it's centered. And then I'll peel back a corner and tack down the fabrics in the corner so that when I put it back on the machine, I won't flip a corner over and get it stitched down where I don't want it to go. So that's what I'll do on the back of all of these in my hoop. I will put it on the back, and then I'll turn it right side up and put it back on the machine and take my next piece of fabric, and on the same one, actually I'll do it on all of them, right side up, and again centering it over the hoop shape. That looks pretty good right there. And if you want, you can put a little bit of glue in the corners again. Not as important on the front as it is on the back, but it's kind of nice to not have to worry about it. So I will do that to all of my little hoop shape pattern pieces here. I'll put it back on the machine and tack it down. So I've got my fabric tacked down on the front and the back of the hoop around the hoop shape. Next step is to go ahead and put the quilting thread in the needle and the bobbin, and it'll stitch all the quilting. So all of my quilting is done on all of my pieces. So now it's time to cut out the fabric, which will make the slots, which will help you put your basket together. So I've just got it resting on my turntable again so that I can turn it easily. And I have a really sharp seam ripper, and I'm just going to poke it through all the layers and give it a little cut, getting every layer all the way down to the bottom. There I go, all the way through. And if you're very careful, you can push it almost to the end. Don't go to the end, you don't want to go through it. But I actually have a hole all the way through. And then using my Hoop Scissors Mini, I'm going to trim right up to that basting stitch. And when I get up to the corner, I'll just snip it right to the corner, come across, and just trim out that whole middle section. I like to keep the hoop resting flat so that I don't disturb the stabilizer and get things to move around. So that's why I like the turntable, because I can turn it to get access to it without disturbing it too much. So we'll go ahead and just trim this completely out. So they will all look like that when they're finished. So I'll trim all of these out. I'm going to put it back on the machine with the same thread that I used, or I could change the thread, I suppose, but the same thread in the needle and the bobbin, and it will stitch a satin stitch to clean up this cut edge. So I've taken all of my blocks out of the hoop, I've cut them apart, and now we're just going to carefully tear away the stabilizer. And note, make sure you mark all of your blocks before you do this so you know which one it is after it's trimmed. So we'll just carefully tear away all the stabilizer between the layers. And if you glued it down, it comes off really easy. So after the stabilizer is removed, we have to trim up this block. So this block, I have a C4 written down here because that's the way it came out of the hoop. You want to lay it on your cutting table with the right side up. I know this is the right side because this is the side that I labeled. And you want to have your little angled piece up at the top. So this I know is my top. Down here at the bottom, I'm going to trim all layers through both layers because I have my front and my back layer and leave a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So I will do that using my trimmer by George with my ruler side facing up. We will trim this, leaving a 1/4 inch seam allowance past the basting stitch. And then we're going to flip it right side down. And I know this is the right side because that's where I labeled my block, right side down. And turn back the back fabric, revealing the front fabric. And we're going to trim away the front fabric only. And to do that, I will use my trimmer by George with the metal edge, shimmy it up to the hoop shape. Make sure nothing's hanging out that I don't want cut. And with my 60mm cutter, I'll trim away the front of my block. So we'll separate the layers. Make sure nothing's hanging out. This is my little angled part, so we'll just turn that back. Put the metal edge up to the hoop shape. Trim off that angle. My last side. So now I've trimmed away the fabric on the front of the block. So now we have our back fabric that's left to trim, and we'll flip the trimmer by George over to the ruler side and use this darkened line here. This is my 1/2 inch line, and we'll line that up pretty much even with the hoop shape. There we go, right there. And we'll trim to leave a 1/2 inch extra fabric. This would be the back fabric. And we'll do that on all the sides except for that very bottom where we trimmed it a 1/4 inch. So there we go. We have all of our slotted blocks ready to go, stitched and trimmed. And we'll move on to the next step. So our blocks are trimmed. It's time to press them. We're going to need a little bit of Roxanne's glue based it, and I'll show you how to do a pretty little mitered corner. You're going to stitch in that mitered corner. So we're going to start with the front side facing up, and we're going to start pressing. So on your corner that is cut off, I like to press that one in first. I just fold it over a 1/4 inch and press it. And then we'll just start going around the block, pressing all the edges a 1/4 inch. This is the corner we're going to miter later. The corner that we are mitering will show at the top of your box when it's all done, your basket. This corner right here. This corner here that's cut off will be inside the basket. You won't really see that one. So everything's pressed under a 1/4 inch. Now I'm going to flip it over and bring this straight corner, bring my edges together like this, and sort of make a miter on the opposite side. And once I get it to miter, I'm going to press that miter in. So these little edges have to line up like this. And we'll just press a crease in so I know where to stitch it. And this is where I will stitch, right where that little crease is, right there. So to stitch it, we're going to fold it, right sides together, and we're going to line up our pressed edges, and I will stitch right on that little creased line. So there's my stitched line at my 45-degree angle, and I can test that it's right if I lay everything down and it lays flat. So if it doesn't lay flat, you've done something not right. So you can check it before you go and cut this off, because now we have to cut this off. That's always a scary part. So I'll cut that right off, getting rid of all the bulk. And then when I turn it back around to the other side, gently poke it out, I will have a very pretty little mitered corner with a couple threads that I need to clean up. There we go. So once that's mitered, I like to glue this edge first, the cut off corner. I'll turn that under a second time. So now it's turned under twice. Put a little glue. Iron it dry. And then I'll continue along here, turn this under a second time. This is the corner that won't really show. It'll be down at the bottom of the basket. This mitered corner we did will show. That's why I like to have the miter. So we'll get that all double pressed. It's pressed for the second time. Run a little bead of glue. There we go. That looks pretty nice. Double press this side again. This is my last side. The glue just holds it in place very nice, and as you can see, hopefully I'm putting just a tiny little bit in there. So there it is, all pressed. Oh, I'm going to fix that little corner right there. I'll just, if that happens, this glue is just temporary. You can just pull it right up, refold it, re-glue it, so it looks a little bit neater on this side. So after you're done gluing, you can take it to the sewing machine and just do a little close edge stitch all the way around. And this is what it'll look like on the other side. And put them aside, and we'll use them later when we put our nesting basket together.